The space station floated in the darkness above a green and blue planet. From far away, it looked like a shining ring in the night sky. Inside the station, thousands of people and aliens lived and worked. Markets were busy, machines hummed, and voices filled the long halls. But in one part of the station, all was silent. This silent part was the royal section of the Thryn Palace. The Thryn were tall, proud aliens with skin that shone faintly like metal under light. They ruled with strength and tradition. In the heart of their palace was the chamber of their queen. Behind the great golden doors lay a secret the whole station had heard about, but few had seen. The queen's daughter, Princess Arya, lay in that chamber. She had been hurt in an attack near the outer colony. No one knew exactly what happened. Some said a malfunctioning machine exploded. Others whispered about a shadowy enemy. But one thing was certain. The princess had not woken since the day she was brought back. The Thryn healers were the best among their kind. They had rare medicines, ancient herbs, and glowing stones that could seal wounds in seconds. Yet after many days, the princess still did not open her eyes. Her breathing grew weaker. Her skin lost its usual light. The queen, who never showed fear, now stood for hours beside the bed of her daughter. Guards in silver armor stood at every entrance. No human was allowed to enter the royal section. The Thryn did not trust humans easily. Years ago, during the frontier wars, the two species had fought bitterly. Even now, though there was peace, there was no friendship. The queen believed that humans were careless and often acted without honor, yet whispers had started in the lower halls of the station. A few workers claimed that a certain human might be able to help. They spoke quietly, afraid of being overheard by the queen's soldiers. They told the story of a man named Thomas. Thomas was once a skilled medic in the wars. He had saved many lives, both human and alien, but his career had ended suddenly after a failed mission. No one spoke of the details. Since then, Thomas had lived in the poorest part of the station, repairing broken tools for food or shelter. He owned nothing of value, had no family, and no powerful friends. Most saw him as a man whose time had passed. One evening, a young Thryn servant named Raylan overheard two human engineers talking about Thomas. They said he had learned healing methods from many worlds, even from species that did not trust humans. They said he knew how to treat wounds that baffled even the best doctors. Raylan hesitated for a long time before deciding to tell the queen's advisor what he heard. When the advisor brought this news to the queen, she was silent for a long while. She did not want a human anywhere near her daughter, but she also knew the truth. If nothing changed soon, the princess might not survive. The queen ordered her advisor to investigate. By the next day, the guards found Thomas in a dim corner of the station's market, fixing a damaged scanner. He looked tired, his clothes worn, but his hands were steady as they worked. When the guards told him the queen wished to see him, Thomas thought it was a mistake. No one of the Thryn royal court had spoken to him in years. He followed the guards through the wide halls of the station. They passed markets, gardens, and fountains, each becoming more beautiful as they neared the palace. Finally, they reached the golden gates that led to the queen's chambers. The doors opened slowly, and Thomas stepped into a place he had never imagined he would see again. The chamber was large and filled with soft light. The walls were shaped like waves, glowing faintly with patterns that moved like water. At the center was the princess's bed. She lay still, her chest rising and falling slowly. Her hair, the color of silver moonlight, spread over the pillows. Beside her stood the queen, tall and regal, wearing a robe of deep blue. Her voice was calm but carried strength when she spoke to Thomas. She told him that her daughter was dying and that her healers had failed. She warned him that if he tried and failed, she would never forgive him. She asked him if he dared to take the task. Thomas looked at the princess, then back at the Queen. He did not speak of his past or his failures. He simply said that he would do all he could. The Queen studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. The guards moved to the edges of the room, watching closely. Thomas walked to the bed and saw the strange mix of wounds on the princess's body. Some looked like burns, others like deep cuts, and some were unlike anything he had seen before. He could tell at once that the Thryn healers had treated her, as if she were fully alien, not realizing that something in her injuries was different. He thought quietly for a moment. There was much to do, and time was short. The silent chamber seemed to grow even quieter as he reached for his small pack, the only thing he had carried with him all these years. Inside were a few human medical tools, worn but still useful. The Queen did not speak, but her eyes never left him. Long before Thomas entered the royal chamber, his life had been very different. Years ago, he wore a clean medic's uniform, carried the symbol of the frontier fleet, and was respected by soldiers across many worlds. He had learned to heal under pressure, saving lives in war zones where danger could appear in any moment. Thomas had worked on humans, alien allies, and even species that distrusted him. His skill was not only in medicine, but also in staying calm when everyone else was losing hope. But all of that ended during a mission that no one liked to speak about. Official reports called it a supply escort failure. The truth was far more complicated, and only a few people knew the details. What mattered to Thomas was that many lives were lost that day, and he was the one blamed. His name was removed from the fleet records. His friends in the service avoided him. His career was gone. With no job and no place to stay, Thomas drifted between stations until he ended up on the Great Ring Station orbiting the green and blue planet. Life there was hard for anyone without credits. He took work where he could find it, fixing small machines, carrying crates, or repairing mining scanners. Sometimes he was paid in food, sometimes in old clothes. Though he had once been surrounded by people, now he lived alone in a small metal room in the lower decks of the station. The walls were thin, and the hum of nearby engines was always in his ears. The air there smelled of oil and metal dust. The lights flickered often, and the water from the pipes was never fully clean. Yet Thomas stayed. He knew no one expected anything from him anymore, and that suited him. Still, his hands remembered the steady movements of a medic. When people in the lower decks were hurt, they sometimes came to him instead of the busy station clinics. He would clean wounds, stitch cuts, or fix broken limbs with old splints and scavenged bandages. He never charged much, only what people could spare. Many called him kind, but unlucky. Others said he was wasting his life. Thomas never argued. He carried a small pack wherever he went. Inside it were the last tools from his medic days. A field scanner with a cracked screen, a pair of precision cutters, a roll of binding cloth, a set of sterilizing wipes, and a few vials of basic medicine. The pack was worn and patched in many places, but it was the only thing from his past he refused to part with. One afternoon, Thomas sat in the noisy lower market, repairing a damaged scanning device for a miner. The man watched silently while Thomas worked, his hands moving quickly and carefully. Even after so many years, Thomas handled tools as if they were an extension of his own fingers. The device flickered to life, and the miner smiled, handing Thomas a few coins and some dried fruit as payment. That was when two humans walked past and began speaking in low voices. They spoke of the alien princess, the Thryn queen's daughter, and how none of the alien healers could save her. One of them mentioned that maybe the outcast medic could help. They laughed softly at the idea, not knowing Thomas could hear every word. Nearby, a young Thryn servant named Ralin was cleaning the edge of a vendor's stall. His long, pointed ears caught every sound. Raylan had been serving in the palace for only a short time, but he had already learned that even the smallest rumor could be important. He glanced toward Thomas and saw a man who did not look like the heroes in stories, just a tired human in worn clothes. Still, the calm in his face when working made Raylan pause. Later that night, Raylan carried food to the Queen's advisor, a tall Thryn elder with deep lines across his face. Raylan hesitated before speaking, but the thought of the dying princess pushed him to share what he had heard. The advisor listened, saying nothing, then dismissed him. The next day, while Thomas was repairing a broken water filter in a storage bay, two armored Thryn guards appeared. They were taller than him by more than a head and wore silver breastplates polished to a shine. Without asking, they told him the Queen had summoned him. Thomas stared at them for a moment, unsure if this was a cruel joke. When they repeated the command, he set down his tools, grabbed his small medic pack, and followed. The walk to the royal section took them through many levels of the station. As they moved upward, the air grew cleaner and cooler. The walls became smooth and decorated with bright colors. In the lower decks, people barely noticed them. But in the upper halls, eyes followed them everywhere. Humans and Thryn alike wondered why a man dressed in patched clothes was being escorted by palace guards. At last, they reached the massive golden gates of the Queen's palace. The metal shone like sunlight, and symbols of the Thryn's long history were carved into its surface. The guards at the entrance stepped aside when they saw who was approaching. Inside, the palace was filled with soft light and the scent of strange flowers. Thomas had never seen such beauty in years, but he kept his eyes forward as the guards led him through the halls. Finally, they stopped before tall silver doors that opened into a chamber larger than any room Thomas had been in since leaving the fleet. At the center of the room stood the Queen herself, dressed in deep blue robes. Her gaze was sharp and unyielding. She told Thomas that her daughter's life was fading. The best healers of her people had tried and failed. She made it clear she did not trust humans and that failure would not be forgiven. Thomas listened without speaking. He had faced danger before, but this was different. He was not here as a soldier or a medic of the fleet. He was here as a man with nothing to lose. He looked at the princess lying on the bed, her face pale, her breathing shallow. Then he looked back at the Queen and said he would try. The Queen studied him for a long moment, then gave a single nod. The guards stepped back, and Thomas moved closer to the bed. As he set his small pack on the table beside the princess, the chamber fell silent. For the first time in many years, Thomas felt the weight of responsibility return to his hands. The air inside the Queen's chamber felt heavy, as if the walls themselves understood the seriousness of the moment. Thomas stood a step away from the bed where Princess Aria lay. Her skin had lost its gentle silver glow, and her breathing was shallow. Every rise and fall of her chest seemed like a struggle. The Queen's eyes never left Thomas. She was known for her calm strength, yet there was a shadow of worry in her gaze. She spoke slowly, her voice deep and steady, explaining the princess's condition. The attack had left strange wounds, burns in some places, deep cuts in others, and an unusual mark near her shoulder that glimmered faintly under the light. The Thryn healers had tried every treatment they knew. Rare herbs were crushed into pastes. Healing stones were pressed against her skin. Energy flows were adjusted using ancient tools. Yet nothing had worked. The Queen admitted that each day her daughter grew weaker, and now time was running out. Thomas listened in silence. He could tell that the wounds were not simple. Something about them seemed unnatural, as if they were caused by more than one kind of damage. It reminded him of battlefield injuries where explosions, fire, and shrapnel often mix together. He began to wonder if the cause might have been some kind of hidden weapon. The Queen took a slow step toward him. Her presence was powerful, and Thomas felt the weight of her words when she said, "Human, I have no trust in your kind, but my daughter's life is worth more than my pride. If you can save her, I will owe you a debt that no Thryn can deny. But if you fail, you will not leave this palace alive." Thomas met her gaze. "I will do what I can," he replied. She studied him for a moment longer, then turned to her advisor, who stood near the edge of the chamber. The advisor's long robe brushed against the floor as he stepped forward, placing a small tray beside Thomas. On it lay a set of alien tools, some shaped like thin silver rods, others like flat stones that hummed faintly. The advisor explained that these were the instruments used by the palace healers, but Thomas was free to use his own methods. Thomas opened his small pack. The sight of his worn tools made the guards exchange uncertain glances. A cracked field scanner, a pair of cutters with faded handles, rolls of bandage cloth, and a few tiny vials of medicine, hardly impressive compared to the shining alien instruments. Yet Thomas had learned long ago that skill mattered more than the tools themselves. He placed the scanner near the princess's side and switched it on. The screen flickered before showing a weak image of her inner injuries. Thomas moved it slowly across her body, reading the faint signals. He noticed something unusual. The burns did not behave like normal heat wounds. There was a residue, a trace of energy he had only seen once before, during a war in a distant sector. That war had involved weapons designed to harm both human and alien tissue in different ways at once. Ordinary healing methods often failed because they treated only one part of the injury, leaving the other to worsen. If the princess had been struck by such a weapon, then it explained why the Thrin healers could not help her fully. The queen watched Thomas closely. "Do you understand what has been done to her?" she asked. "I have an idea," Thomas answered. "But to treat her, I will need to use both my methods and yours. If we only use one, she will not recover." The queen frowned. "Our healers will not approve." "Then they should stay and watch," Thomas said calmly. "If I am wrong, you will know soon enough." A tense silence filled the chamber. The guards shifted slightly, ready to act if the queen gave the signal. But after a long pause, she gave a short nod. "Do what you must." The queen's advisor called for 2 Thrin healers to enter. They came quickly, their robes trailing across the floor. They stood beside Thomas, their expressions doubtful. One of them handed him a bowl of glowing green liquid. It was a healing extract from a plant that grew only on the Thrin homeworld. Thomas dipped a clean cloth into it and pressed it gently against the burns, letting the strange energy in the liquid react with the damaged skin. Next, Thomas took one of his own vials and injected a small amount of medicine near the wound. The healers gasped softly. This was not their way. They preferred to heal without piercing the skin. Thomas ignored them and focused on the princess. The mixture of the alien extract and human medicine began to work slowly. The faint shimmer near the princess's shoulder grew dimmer. Thomas repeated the process carefully, treating each wound with both methods. Hours passed inside the chamber. The queen stood near the head of the bed, silent and unmoving. The healers watched Thomas, sometimes stepping in to assist when he requested. Though they did not admit it, they were learning something new. At last, Thomas stepped back. He had done all he could for the moment. "She needs to rest now," he said. "Her body will decide in the next few hours if the treatment works." The queen's gaze softened only slightly. "You will remain in the palace until we know the outcome," she ordered. Thomas agreed. The guards led him to a small guest room within the palace. It was far more comfortable than the place he had lived in for years, but he could not relax. His mind kept returning to the princess's face and the slow rhythm of her breathing. The guest room where Thomas waited was quiet, but his thoughts were loud. He sat at the small table, his worn medic pack resting beside him. He had treated many patients before, but this was different. This was not a battlefield, and the person he was trying to save was no ordinary patient. She was the daughter of a queen, the symbol of her people's pride. One wrong step could cost not only the princess's life, but also his own. He had been given food, but he had barely touched it. His mind kept replaying the details of the injuries, the burns, the cuts, the strange glowing mark. All of it seemed like pieces of a puzzle that he needed to solve before time ran out. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. A young servant entered, bowing slightly. "The Queen requests your presence. The princess's condition has changed," the servant said. Thomas grabbed his pack and followed without a word. The walk back to the royal chamber felt longer than before. The tall silver doors opened again, and he stepped into the same soft light as before. The Queen stood beside the bed, her eyes fixed on her daughter. Princess Aria's breathing was weaker than it had been earlier. Her lips were pale, and a faint shimmer still lingered on her skin. The two palace healers stood nearby, their faces tense. One of them stepped forward and said, "The treatment you gave has slowed the decline, but her strength is fading. We do not understand how to finish the healing." Thomas placed his pack on the side table. "I will need more time and closer work," he said. "If you want me to help, I will need to touch the wounds directly and work without interruption." The healers looked at the Queen, uncertain. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Do what you must, but know that if you harm her in any way, there will be no mercy." Thomas nodded. He moved closer to the bed and looked down at the princess. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, but the slow, shallow breaths told a different story. He placed his fingers gently against her wrist, feeling the faint pulse. Then he touched the edge of the strange mark near her shoulder. It felt warmer than the rest of her skin, almost as if it carried its own heat. He pulled out the cracked field scanner from his pack and adjusted its settings. The screen showed a thin outline of the wound beneath the surface. Energy traces were still moving through it, interfering with the body's natural healing. "This is why she is not getting better," Thomas said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "The wound is feeding itself with the energy that remains inside. It needs to be drained." The healers frowned. "If you drain it, you might harm her life energy," one warned. "Not if it is done carefully," Thomas replied. He reached for a small silver rod from the alien tools. It was used by Thrin healers to draw out impurities from the body. Thomas combined it with one of his own instruments, a narrow injector tube filled with a stabilizing serum. The idea was to draw out the harmful energy while replacing it with a balancing agent so the body would not weaken further. He leaned closer to the princess, placing one hand under her shoulder and the other guiding the combined tool to the center of the mark. The room grew even quieter, the only sound being the faint hum of the silver rod. Thomas kept his focus steady, controlling the flow of energy. A thin shimmer of light began to rise from the wound, moving toward the tip of the rod. The healers stepped back in surprise. The Queen did not move, but her eyes followed every motion. Thomas felt resistance, as if the energy did not want to leave. He kept working slowly, drawing it out bit by bit. Each time a small wave of it left, he pressed the injector to release a drop of serum into the wound. The two processes balanced each other, preventing shock to the princess's body. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat formed on Thomas's forehead, but his hands remained steady. He had learned long ago that the smallest mistake in moments like this could undo all progress. At last, the glow from the wound began to fade. The heat beneath. His fingers cooled. Thomas set the tools aside and checked the scanner again. The strange readings had weakened, showing that most of the harmful energy was gone. He cleaned the area with a cloth dipped in the green healing extract the healers had provided earlier. Then he wrapped it gently in a soft bandage cloth from his own pack. When he stepped back, he saw that the princess's breathing had grown a little stronger. It was still weak, but the change was clear. One of the healers leaned closer, checking for themselves, and then looked at the Queen with a nod. The Queen's expression remained serious, but there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. "You have done something no one else could," she said. "But will it last?" Thomas wiped his hands on a cloth. "We will know in the next few hours. If her body accepts the change, her strength will return. If not, I will need to try again." The Queen considered his words, then ordered the healers to remain close and watch the princess through the night. She told Thomas to rest, but he shook his head. "I will stay here. If anything changes, I need to be ready." A chair was brought for him, and he sat beside the bed, his eyes on the princess. The palace lights dimmed to the soft glow of night, but Thomas did not close his eyes. He listened to the steady, slow breaths, each one a reminder of the thin line between life and loss. Hours passed. Sometimes he adjusted the bandage. Sometimes he checked her pulse, but mostly he waited. The Queen had left the chamber, though. Her guards remained at the doors. The healers whispered quietly to each other, their earlier doubt replaced with cautious respect. As the first hint of morning light touched the walls, Thomas noticed a small change. The princess's face had gained a faint touch of color. Her breathing was deeper than before. It was not full recovery, but it was the first true sign of hope. Thomas leaned back slightly, allowing himself a rare moment of relief. He knew the hardest part was still ahead, but for now the first touch of healing had begun to take hold. The chamber was quiet, except for the soft rhythm of the princess's breathing. Thomas sat in the chair beside her bed, his back straight despite the hours he had already spent there. His hands rested on his knees, but his mind was alert. Every sound, every movement in the room was noticed. The two palace healers moved in and out of the chamber, bringing fresh cloths, adjusting the light, or checking the instruments that measured the princess's heartbeat. Each time they looked at Thomas, their expressions carried less doubt than before. He had done something they could not. Still, they wondered if it would be enough. Thomas glanced at the faint glow of the healing stones placed around the bed. They gave off a soft green light, casting gentle patterns on the walls. He knew the stones could help, but only if the body itself had the strength to heal. If the princess's body gave up, no stone or medicine could bring her back. The Queen had not returned since leaving earlier, but her presence was still felt. The guards at the doors stood unmoving, their silver armor shining under the chamber lights. Every so often, one of them would glance toward the bed, their expressions unreadable. Hours passed, and Thomas kept to his watch. He leaned forward at times to check the princess's pulse or to feel the temperature of her skin. The warmth near the wound had lessened, and that was a good sign. The glow from the strange injury had not returned, but healing was never simple. Thomas knew that the next danger was weakness. The attack had drained her strength, and the treatment itself had taken more energy from her. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small pouch containing a fine powder. It was made from dried plants from a distant farming world. When mixed with water, it became a drink that helped the body recover after illness or injury. One of the healers looked at the pouch with curiosity. "What is that?" they asked. "A stimulant for recovery," Thomas explained. "It works slowly, but it helps the body rebuild its energy. I will need warm water to prepare it." The healer nodded and left the room. When they returned, Thomas carefully mixed the powder into the water, stirring until the pale liquid was smooth. He then used a small dropper to give the princess a few sips at a time. It was not much, but enough to begin. After this, Thomas checked her breathing again. It was steady but still slow. He knew she needed rest, yet rest alone might not be enough. He began gently massaging her hands and arms to keep the blood flowing, a trick he had learned during long evacuations in the war. The healers watched silently, taking note of his methods. The night deepened. The soft green light from the healing stones seemed to grow warmer, filling the chamber with a peaceful glow. Outside the tall windows, the curve of the planet below reflected the distant starlight. Thomas's own body was beginning to feel the strain. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, and his shoulders ached from sitting so long. But he refused to leave his post. Years of working through exhaustion had taught him how to push through discomfort. The thought of leaving her side, even for a short time, was not something he could accept. Once, during the war, he had treated a young soldier with injuries similar to the princess's. He had left the soldier's side for only a short while, trusting others to watch over him. But when he returned, the soldier was gone. That loss had stayed with him. Tonight he would not make the same mistake. From time to time, the princess's face moved slightly, as if she was dreaming. Thomas noticed these small changes and kept watch, ready to respond if she woke. But each time her body remained still after the faintest motion. The hours felt endless. The healers worked in shifts, but Thomas remained the same, quiet and focused. When one of them offered to take over so he could rest, he simply shook his head. "She will need me if anything changes," he said. In the deepest hour of the night, a sudden change made Thomas lean forward. The princess's breathing quickened for a few seconds, and her brow tightened as though she felt pain. Thomas placed a hand lightly on her forehead. It was warmer than before. He quickly prepared a fresh cloth soaked in cool water and placed it across her head. Then he adjusted the bandage near the wound, making sure it was clean and secure. The healers brought fresh extract from their plants, and Thomas applied a thin layer to the injury before rewrapping it. Slowly, her breathing calmed again. The warmth on her forehead began to fade, and her face relaxed. Thomas did not lean back this time. He kept his hand near her wrist, feeling the steady pulse until he was sure she was stable. The healers exchanged quiet words in their own language. Though Thomas could not understand all of it, he recognized the tone. They were beginning to believe she might survive. Finally, the first faint signs of morning began to touch the high windows. A pale light joined the glow of the healing stones, making the chamber feel less heavy. Thomas looked at the princess again and noticed something small but important. Her color was better. It was a subtle change, but to a medic's eye it meant the treatment was taking hold. The guards at the doors shifted slightly, as if sensing the change in the room's mood. One left silently, likely to inform the queen of the update. Thomas remained seated, his eyes still on his patient. He allowed himself one slow breath of relief, but did not relax fully. The long night was ending, but the work was not finished. Recovery was a road, and the princess had only taken the first step. As the chamber filled with morning light, Thomas tightened the strap on his medic pack. He knew the coming hours would decide everything. The first rays of the sun touched the palace walls, turning the soft green glow of the healing stones into a mix of gold and emerald. The chamber felt warmer, lighter, and somehow hopeful. Thomas remained seated beside the bed, watching the princess closely. He had not slept, and his body ached from the long hours, but he did not move. He knew that the most delicate moment was approaching. The princess's breathing had become steadier throughout the night. Her chest rose and fell in a smooth rhythm. Thomas gently placed his hand on her wrist to feel the pulse. It was stronger than before, though still faint. He allowed himself a small nod. The first signs of recovery were visible. For hours, he had watched her, adjusting the bandages, checking the extracts, and ensuring her comfort. The healers had stepped back after the first part of the night, allowing Thomas to continue in his methods. They had learned to trust his skill, though silently, and occasionally offered him new plant extracts or clean cloths. Thomas accepted them, without comment, focusing entirely on the princess. Then, something extraordinary happened. The princess stirred. Her fingers twitched, her eyelids moved, and a faint sigh escaped her lips. Tomas leaned closer, speaking softly. "You are safe. Princess, you are going to be all right." His voice was calm, steady, and full of reassurance. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, they looked confused. Then, slowly, she focused on Thomas. They were wide eyes, silver like moonlight, and they reflected fear, pain, and something else, a spark of trust. Thomas smiled gently. "You are awake," he said. "You are safe now. Nothing will harm you." The queen entered the room quietly with her advisors and guards. She had been informed of the progress, and now she wanted to witness it herself. The moment she saw the princess awake, her expression softened in a way that few had ever seen. Her eyes, usually sharp and commanding, reflected relief and gratitude. Thomas stepped back slightly, allowing the queen to approach. The princess's eyes followed the queen, and then she blinked, trying to recognize the towering figure before her. The queen knelt beside the bed, her voice soft but firm. "Arya, my daughter, can you speak?" The princess's lips moved, forming words that were weak but clear. "Mother, I am here." The queen reached out and held her daughter's hand, her fingers trembling slightly. The palace healers watched silently, astonished by the progress. Thomas remained near the bed, his eyes scanning for any sign of fatigue or danger. The queen turned her gaze toward Thomas. "Human," she said, her voice steady now, but carrying an unusual tone. "Explain how a man with nothing could do what my best healers could not." Tomas met her gaze, calm and honest. "When you have nothing, there is nothing to lose," he replied. "I can only focus on saving life. I have no fear of status or wealth. I only think about what is in front of me." The queen studied him carefully. For the first time, her expression showed more than authority. There was respect, tempered with surprise. "Your courage is unusual," she said. "Many of my people would have failed without fear, but also without care. You worked with your hands and your mind, not just your pride." Thomas nodded. He looked at the princess, who was now breathing more steadily and moving slightly in her bed. "She will need time to fully recover," he said. "But the body has accepted the treatment. She has the strength to survive now." The queen held her daughter's hand a moment longer, then stood. She turned to Thomas and said, "I offered you the place of royal medic, but I see that your heart is not in titles or wealth. Tell me, will you accept this role?" Thomas shook his head. "I have no need for titles or status," he said. "I am here to help, but I belong among those who need help most. I will stay where I can make a difference, not where I am given honor." The queen's eyes softened further. She had expected pride, arrogance, or fear in a human, but not this quiet courage and humility. "Then stay as you choose," she said. "But know this, Thomas. You have earned our trust and gratitude. The Thryn will not forget your deeds. You have bridged two worlds tonight." The princess now smiled faintly at Thomas, a weak but genuine expression. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." Thomas smiled back gently. "You did not need saving alone," he said. "We worked together. Your body fought, and I guided it." The healers nodded silently, acknowledging the truth. Thomas had shown them new ways to combine methods, ways they had never considered. For the first time, they saw that human knowledge could complement their own centuries of experience. The queen stepped closer to Thomas again. "You have proven more than skill," she said. "You have shown courage, patience, and care. These are qualities we have long respected but rarely found in outsiders. You are welcome in the palace whenever your help is needed." Tomas nodded. grateful for the words, but not seeking more. He had learned long ago that respect earned quietly meant more than public praise. The princess slowly sat up, leaning on a pillow. Tomas remained nearby, ready to assist, guiding her movements to ensure she did not strain her recovering body. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Stronger," she replied, her voice gaining steadiness. "I can breathe and move more easily." Thomas smiled, noting the gradual improvement. "Good. The night was long, but you have survived. The worst is over." The queen watched the interaction silently. She had been a ruler who commanded obedience, yet she now saw that healing required more than authority. It required trust, patience, and the courage to try the unknown. The chamber seemed lighter now, not only from the morning light, but also from the sense of relief that filled it. Guards relaxed, healers whispered quietly among themselves, and even the air seemed less tense. The bond between human and Thrin had taken its first step. Finally, Thomas prepared to step back slightly. He had done his part, and now the body, the care, and the time would do the rest. He remained in the room, vigilant but at ease, knowing that the princess had turned the corner from danger toward recovery. The queen approached Thomas once more. "You have saved more than a life tonight," she said softly. "You have given hope where none existed. For that, we will not forget you." Thomas bowed slightly, a gesture of respect rather than submission. "It was my duty to help," he replied. "I have nothing, but even that can be enough when it matters." The princess reached out her hand toward him. "Stay," she said. "I want you nearby until I am stronger." Thomas smiled quietly and took his place again by her side. He had no title, no wealth, no home, but he had purpose and trust. For now, that was everything. The dawn fully entered the chamber, and the long night of struggle was finally over. The princess had awakened, and in that moment, a bond had been formed that would last far beyond this one chamber. The palace was quiet in the early morning, but not still. Birds from the sky gardens chirped softly, and sunlight poured through tall windows, reflecting off polished floors. The Thrin royal guards moved through the halls with silent steps, and the palace healers were already busy preparing new treatments and supplies for the princess. Tomas remained in the chamber, seated beside Princess Arya. She had slept well after her awakening, and her strength was returning with every hour. Her movements were more confident now, and she smiled faintly at Tomas whenever he offered guidance. The bond between them had grown quietly, based on trust, patience, and care. The queen entered the chamber, her robes flowing behind her. Her expression was calm, yet the eyes that watched her daughter held a deep pride. She approached Tomas, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You have done more than heal my daughter," she said. "You have shown us that humans and Thrin can work together in ways we never imagined." Tomas looked up, meeting her gaze. "I only did what I could," he replied. "The princess helped herself. I guided her, but she fought the hardest, so." Queen nodded. "Courage, skill, and care. These are qualities we value above all else. You have reminded us that even a human, one without wealth or title, can bring great good." The princess now sat fully upright in bed. "Tomas," she said, her voice stronger, "I feel stronger too. The pain is fading, and I can breathe easier." "You saved me, and I will not forget it." Tomas offered a small smile. "Recovery is slow, but you are healing well. Soon you will be fully strong again." For the first time since his arrival, Tomas allowed himself to relax. The weight of responsibility had not left him, but the immediate danger had passed. He glanced around the chamber, seeing the two Thrin healers watching him closely. They no longer carried doubt in their eyes. Instead, there was respect, even admiration. The queen motioned for the guards to step back and spoke to the healers. From this day forward, humans are welcome in the palace when they bring knowledge, skill, and care. Thomas has shown that cooperation can save lives." The healers murmured among themselves, nodding quietly. They had long relied on their own methods, trusting tradition over outside knowledge. Now they had learned that combining human skill with Thrin wisdom could achieve what was once impossible. Princess Arya looked at Thomas, then at her mother. "We should not forget what happened. The attack was deliberate. Someone wanted to harm me, and perhaps my people. We must be prepared, and we must learn to work together with those who can help." The Queen's gaze was steady. "You speak wisely, my daughter. Thomas, your presence has reminded us of the value of trust and courage. I will make sure your role as a bridge between our people is recognized." Thomas shook his head. "I do not need recognition or rewards. I only need to help where I am needed most." The Queen's eyes softened. "That is a rare quality. Very few can say the same. Even so, know that your deeds will be remembered. You have earned the gratitude of the Thrin and of my daughter." Fuck. Princess reached for Thomas's hand, and he held it gently. The gesture was simple, yet it carried meaning. Between the human and the Thrin, a bond had formed. It was built on trust, bravery, and a shared goal: to protect life. Over the next few days, the princess continued to recover. Thomas worked with her and the palace healers, teaching small techniques that combined human and Thrin methods. He showed them how to read subtle signs in the body, how to apply gentle pressure, and how to use their knowledge in ways that respected the body's limits. The healers absorbed everything, learning quickly and applying it with care. The princess grew stronger by the hour, walking slowly with Thomas supporting her at first, then taking confident steps on her own. The palace buzzed with quiet excitement at her progress, and even the guards spoke in hushed tones about the human, who had saved a royal life. One afternoon, the Queen called a meeting in the High Council Hall. Thomas was invited to attend, though he did not carry a title or uniform. He entered quietly, observing the long table where the Queen and her advisors sat. The princess followed, leaning lightly on her mother's arm. The Queen addressed the council. "This human, Thomas, has proven that cooperation between humans and Thrin can save lives. We must consider how we can work together more often. His knowledge, skill, and courage are assets to us all." The advisors murmured, some with hesitation, others with curiosity. Thomas remained silent, listening. He knew the power of words was. Not his own, but the work he had done spoke louder than anything he could say. One of the council elders, an older Thrin with long silver hair, spoke slowly. "Perhaps it is time we rethink our view of humans. They have brought knowledge and skill in ways we did not anticipate." The Queen nodded. "This is only the beginning. From now on, we will open channels for cooperation. We will ensure that those with skill and courage, regardless of species, are welcomed when they bring good to our people." Princess Arya looked at Thomas and smiled. "You have changed my world. You have changed ours. I want to learn more from you, and I want others to know that trust is stronger than fear." Thomas smiled back, feeling a warmth he had not known in years. "I will teach what I can, Princess, and I will help wherever I am needed." The council meeting ended, and Thomas returned to the princess's chamber. They spent the rest of the day reviewing her progress, discussing future training, and planning ways to protect her people together. The Queen observed silently, her expression calm but proud. She had witnessed a human perform what many Thrin would have deemed impossible. As the sun set that evening, the chamber glowed with the same soft green light of the healing stones. Thomas sat beside the princess once more. She reached for his hand and squeezed it lightly. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. Thomas nodded. No thanks needed. The future is what we build together. The queen entered quietly and placed a hand on the princess's shoulder. The bridge you have created, Thomas, will last far longer than tonight. You have shown our people that trust and courage are universal. You are a part of our story now. Thomas looked around the chamber, seeing hope reflected in the faces of the queen, the princess, and the healers. He realized that his life of wandering and survival had brought him here for a reason. Even a man with nothing could make a difference, and in that difference, two worlds had found a connection. The stars outside the palace windows twinkled softly, a silent reminder that the universe was wide, full of danger and wonder, but also full of chance for courage and trust. Thomas remained by the princess's side, ready for whatever the future would bring, knowing that together, humans and Thryn could face anything. The bridge between worlds had been built, quietly and firmly, by a human with nothing and a Thryn princess who had found new life.